Hi, everyone. Welcome to our book club. This is the second week of our book club, but the first week that we've actually read something. Last week, we were talking about what book we're going to read, how many pages of it we were going to read, etc. So this week, hopefully most of you were able to read the whole section of the book. If there's anybody that's new today, that's totally okay. You can talk about the book with us too. Maybe you've read it in the past. Maybe you're interested in reading it. That's totally fine. If you didn't have time to read the book yet this week, or you haven't been able to get it yet, it's totally cool. We hope that you're able to get a copy of the book and kind of catch up to where we are. We're going to just continue reading a section of the book every week, and you can listen in. And then next week, you can kind of talk with us and contribute too. So let's see who we have here today so far. Looks like we have a pretty good group of people. As always, if you have any questions or want to share anything, you can type your answers or questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So in order to have a book club discussion today to talk about the book we're going to be reading, that's mostly what we're going to be doing. It's just discussing the book. I'll need you to write all of your answers into that Q&A box so that we can all talk with each other. So I see already Paige has said hello. Shanna said hello. April. Shanna's sister Lorna is here. Hi, Lorna. Welcome. N is here. Gerard, Aubrey, Jordan, Ian, Milo. So awesome. I'm glad everybody's here. Really quickly, because I think we have some people that are new this week, I'm going to just quickly go over some of the things that we talked about last week in terms of what we're planning to do, how this is going to work, so that everybody that's here can know about how book club works. So let me go ahead and bring that up. Okay, so welcome to book club. Glad you guys are here. So here's our goals of book club. We're going to have fun reading and discussing great books. We're going to improve our understanding of what we read, and we're going to learn to read a little bit more quickly, hopefully. Those are three of the things that people that want to read, wanted to work on, wanted to improve at. And I'm excited to help you guys with those same goals. So our first pick for our book club is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is what the cover looks like of a lot of copies. You might find a copy that has like a photograph on the front from the movie that they made out of this book, but it should usually look like that. And Wonder is the story of Augie Pullman, that's short for August Pullman, a 10-year-old boy who was born with a severe facial deformity. When the book begins, he is going to school for the first time in his life, starting in the 5th grade. So this is a great book. I hope you guys enjoyed the first section, and this is what we're going to be talking about. Also, if this is your first week here and you haven't been able to pick up a copy of the book yet, I just wanted to tell you what we talked about last week in terms of how to get a copy of the book. So if your local library is open, most libraries will have copies of this book. My local library, the Sheridan Library, which is close to our school, you can order books online and they will either pull it off of the shelf for you, or they will get it from another library in the network of libraries that library is part of. So you can order it online, and what they're doing at my local library right now is they are, you have to like call in and kind of schedule a time, and they'll bring it out to the curb and they'll bring the books to you. They're doing that for, safety and to make sure everybody stays healthy. So the rules at your library might be different. Maybe at your local library, they'll just let you go in and pick it out. Maybe they need you to wait on the curb. So talk to your local library and you can find out how to get an actual physical copy of the book. There's also an app you can get on your phone, or you can go to on a laptop. It looks like this. This is the Libby app. You can download ebooks to your Kindle or to another device. The books are free, but you do need a library card. So that's another way. You can go to Libby in your app store, or go to libbyapp.com in your internet browser to download books that way. You can also just go to a bookstore, or you can go to amazon.com and buy a copy, or you can buy an ebook off of Amazon, or the Apple store, There's a lot of ways to get to pay for the book if you want to buy a copy. But I always love to put out there that the local library systems in most areas are amazing, and they want to get these books into your hands too. So hopefully you're able to get it one way or another if you haven't already. So our week 1 assignment was to read through page 48 of Wonder. So mostly how we're going to talk about this is I'll ask you guys questions and you type your answers into the Q&A box and we will talk about it. So already I see here more people are saying hi. Jordan said hi. Milo. Let's see. Shanna says that she had fun reading the section. I'm glad to hear that. Ibuka said, I've already read the book before. That's great. I'm glad you're here. I love that people that have read the book too are here to discuss it with us. April read that sample on her Kindle. Awesome. Glad to hear it, April. And said, I really enjoyed this book. Awesome. Yeah, I really like it too. It really gets you right there. It touched me in my heart. It's really good. And also says it is very emotional and you can really connect with the character's feelings. I agree. And it has amazing vocabulary, he says. I also agree. Jordan says that looks like Sora. Jordan, you'll have to tell me more. I'm not sure what Sora is. If you're talking about the photo behind me, I looked up where the book takes place in a part of Manhattan, and I was looking for a picture of that area of New York. So this is what it came up with. I hope this is right. I think this kind of looks like the movie that they made too. So I think this is the right area of New York. Let's see. Adira says hello, and I am halfway through the whole book or just the 48 pages. If so, that's fine. You can still talk about it with us. And Amber says, is the book Wonder? You showed a chapter book. Yeah, I have a copy of it here too. This is Wonder. This is a hardback copy. If it's on your Kindle or another device, it will look different, but this is mine. Yes, it is a chapter book. It's about 320 pages, but this is the book that we're reading for the book club. Okay, great. So, oh, Jordan says Sora is an app where you can get books from the library on your phone or laptop. Awesome. Yeah, Libby app is the one that I use, but I think there's other apps out there too. There's one called Overdrive, and Libby and Overdrive are, I think they're like the same company that help you check out library books, but there's other ones out there too. So that's awesome. Milo read to page 51. That's fine, Milo. There's not I just picked 48 because I thought it was a good place to end off for the week. But if you read a little bit ahead, that's totally fine. There's people here, Milo, that have read the entire book before. So 48 pages was just, I thought, a good point that we would all kind of, if you haven't read the book before, you could get to that point and then we would all know what we were talking about. So no worries. Shanna's book says it is 602 pages. Okay. Yeah, different copies of a book might have different numbers of pages. Some books have, they make the words bigger, so then the book would be more pages long. Yeah, depending on how many pages are in your copy, the part that I was planning to end off with, it's right after the teacher, Mr. Brown, talks about precepts. What a precept is, he gives his class a precept, and that was the last page that in my copy, that's page, I don't know if you can see that, but that's page 48 right there. Your copy might go to a different spot, but that's okay. Also, if you're reading it on a Kindle or another device, this spot is about 15% of the way through. I think for probably in the registration for next week's class, I'll say several different ways for you to know how far to read. Page number in the hardback copy, what percentage through on a Kindle so we all understand what page we're getting to. Or maybe I'll say what chapter to read through. Okay, let's start talking about the book. So, oh yeah, Shanna says that in this, my copy, the words are smaller than in hers. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Sometimes different copies of a book, they make it look different. Okay, good. So here's the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is just what do you think of the book so far? After 48 pages, I would just like to get some feedback from you guys on what you thought of this first section. If you haven't read the book before, or if you have, what did you think? How, it's really interesting at the start of a book, an author has to kind of start the story off in an interesting way to kind of get the reader interested, kind of tell you what the story is about. And your first impression means your first sort of how you think about the book or how you feel about the book when you first start off. So I'd be interested in hearing what you guys think about the book just from the first little bit. Milo says it's really good. Aubrey says, I love it. Awesome, cool. Jordan says, I've seen the movie, but that is not the same thing. Yeah, I thought the movie was really good too. Especially as a parent, seeing all the things that Augie goes through and how he overcomes them throughout the whole story. It really affected me too. I was, when I saw the movie, I thought to myself, I really admired the character, how, brave you'd have to be to do a lot of this, stuff, to experience these things for the first time. And I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like to go through this with your family too. So let's see. Ava says, it's sad. Yeah, I would agree that it's sad at parts. Alan says, I really like it. And says, amazing. Ian says, I think it was really good. Gerard says, I don't know much about the book. That's okay. If you get a copy of it and you start reading along, just jump into it. And yeah, then you'll be able to talk about it with us. And says, I really love this story. And Milo asks, is it a true story? No, it's fiction. It's not a true story, but I feel like it's written so well that I would believe it if somebody says it was a true story. Did you guys feel the same way? Did anybody else feel like it could be a true story or it was written by a person like it was their real life? N says, it really describes how to overcome your disadvantages in life. I agree. I think that's a really good point. AG's talking about some of the things that happened in the book already. AG, I'm going to come back to what you say. Yeah, AG has a really good point here. AG, I'm going to come back to that. Ava says it's based on true events. I don't know. I don't think there's a real person that Augie is based on, but there definitely are people in real life that are born with disabilities, or they're born with like their body not looking the same or not working the same as most people. So even if Augie and his family aren't real people, this kind of situation does happen in real life. Shanna says, okay, so this is what Shanna thinks about it. So the main character had to go through a lot of surgeries. No one should have to go through that much in that short of a time. He is only 10 years old and he went through something like 30 surgeries. Yeah, I agree. It's really tough, like what he had to do, but that the character is still so nice and friendly and still has a mostly positive outlook on life. It's pretty amazing. Milo says, Wonder is not based on a true story. It is, however, inspired by real events. Oh, good. I think Milo might have copied and pasted this from the internet. It says, writer R.J. Palacio, who published the novel upon which Wonder is... Oh, this is probably talking about the movie. So the novel was published in 2012, was inspired to write a story about a child with a facial deformity after a trip to an ice cream store. Yeah, I remember hearing about that, reading about that. So the writer saw a child in real life who had a pretty severe facial deformity. And I think she wondered to herself what living like that would be like. And she was inspired to write a book based on it. And that's what Wonder is. Yeah, so so some of the commenters, some of the viewers are saying that they feel it is a real story because it describes situations that happen in life. So that's a good point. That's a good question. So when we talk about if something is like a true story or if it's like what we would say is nonfiction compared to something that is fiction or, okay, so two categories, we have fiction and nonfiction. Fiction is, it didn't really happen. Nonfiction is, it did happen in real life. Now, the thing about fiction is it can describe things that really do happen in real life. You have types of fiction like a fantasy novel where there's magic and dragons, or like science fiction that takes place in the future and has time travel and lasers and whatever. We obviously know that that's fiction. Like those things either never happened in the past, or they haven't happened yet in real life or in the future. So it's very obvious that we know that that's not real. But you can also have books set in this real world that we all live in. It's set in New York. It deals with normal people that have problems that they're trying to overcome, like going to school for the first time, dealing with a severe health problem. Those are real life things. But if the story, like the names of the people in the story, they're not real people. The school in the book, it's not a real school. All these things are based on real things, but you couldn't go there and actually meet these people in real life or actually see these places. That means it's still fiction, but it's based on real life. So nonfiction, it would have to be, these are exactly real people. Like it's more like an encyclopedia article or like a news report. Those things are nonfiction. They're saying, if you go to New York, you can meet this person in real life if you wanted to. That's nonfiction. So yeah, this is part of that whole genre where it feels like real life, even if it didn't really happen. Let's see. Yeah, Shanna goes on to say, if you have problems in your life and you read this, you start to think that your problems are not so bad. And it does seem really real. I actually thought it might be real just for a chapter or so. Yeah, you make a really good point there, Shanna. And I'd actually like to hear what everybody else thinks about that idea. So again, Shanna said, if you have problems in your life and you read this book, you might start to think that your problems are not as bad. What do the rest of our watchers think about that? I think that's a really interesting viewpoint. That's not to say that the problems we're experiencing aren't also real and important, but what is it like to read about somebody whose problems are maybe really big and really impact their life a lot? How did that affect you guys as much as it affected Shanna? Did anybody else think about their own life and maybe compare it to Augie's and see, what do I think about my problems? What do I think about what's going on in my life when I compare it to this other person's life? Alette asks, what are we talking about? I think Alette just got here. Alette, we are discussing this book. It's called Wonder. This week we read the first 48 pages of it outside of class, and now we're talking about what we read. If you didn't read the book yet, that's totally fine. You can still stick around and talk about it or listen to what we're talking about. And we talked about some ways that if you don't have this book, how you can get it from the library or maybe buy it online, and then you can read it and talk about it with us. Yeah, on the earlier thing, Jordan says, I personally believe that if the book is based in the future and is somewhat realistic, it is possible for that book to become a reality. Yeah, that's kind of like how science fiction sometimes predicts the future. And Jordan says, I call it futuristic realism. Yeah, I agree. Shanna has a question. What about if somebody wrote about a fiction book about the future, but then it actually happened? Then does it become a nonfiction book? Well, you'd have to be really, really, really accurate to tell something that happened so accurately that it then happened that way, if that makes sense. If you write a fiction book, there's almost no way that it would exactly happen that way. So it would still be fiction. But there's been a lot of times that a book describes something in a fictional way, and that either inspired people to make that thing in real life, or then something similar did happen in real life. So yeah, maybe we should talk about it in our creative writing class. That's a whole topic. That could be really interesting. Okay, good. So here are some people answering that question about, did the book make you think about your life or your problems, or did you kind of compare your life to Augie's at all? Ava says, you should be grateful because a lot of people have it worse than you. It seems like that's one of the messages in the book. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, Ava. April says, oh my gosh, that's true. Good. Alan says, definitely. I guess definitely was, thinking something similar to that. Jordan says, I think that the problems that are in Wonder are very bad. And when you have problems and you read the book, you realize that though Augie went through a lot of stuff, he still had some great things happen. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that too. Awesome. Oh, Alette did read the section. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it, Alette. Okay, so thank you guys for answering about that. If you still would like, at any point, if you want to jump in and answer a question, if you're thinking about it and you want to write your answer in there, go for it. We can always go back and read those answers. Gerard says, I live my life a bit like Augie. Okay, great. If you want to tell us more, Gerard, feel free. Yeah. Oh, Gerard says, but I don't have the same kind of like facial problems. Okay. So great. The next thing I wanted to ask you guys about is at the bottom of page 3. That's the first page of the book. Augie starts talking about his life. And Augie says, I know I'm not an ordinary 10-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I do ordinary things. He describes some ordinary things. But he wishes that, he says, if I had a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face that no one ever noticed at all. At the bottom of the page, he says, I won't describe what I look like. Whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. So from page 1, you're starting to kind of get a feel for who Augie is, what he sounds like, how he talks about his life and his problems. It's really interesting, and I agree with the one viewer who said it's a little bit sad. If I thought about if I had a magic lamp and I had one wish, what would I wish for? I think I could think of a lot of huge, extraordinary, awesome things that I would like. I think if the rest of us got a magic lamp, we could think of some pretty awesome things that we would wish for if we got one wish. But Augie says, if I found a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face that no one ever noticed at all. What do you guys think about that? What would it be like that if you could have one wish, that's what you would wish for? It kind of shows you how he feels about this, right? He then says, whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse about what he looks like. That's an interesting way to describe himself, because I feel like some of us have pretty active imaginations, and we could think of a pretty extreme way that a person could look. So the fact that he says, whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. What does that tell you about how Augie feels about himself and how he looks? At this point in the book, when the book first starts, Augie has already had a lot of surgeries to help him out. He tells us later that he's already had, I think, like a viewer said, like 27 surgeries to help fix things that are wrong with his body and with his face. Yet, even after all these surgeries, he still feels in a pretty extreme way about how he looks. So what did you guys think about that? How he said if he had one wish, and then how he described how he looks? April describes, that if she had a magic lamp, she would wish for more wishes. I think a lot of people would wish for other things. And then Adira says, I think he just wants to be normal. So I think it really makes you think about, if you had anything, if you could wish for anything, and that's what he picks, it kind of tells you, what sort of situation he's in and how extreme he feels about it. Kind of like, somebody was saying earlier, it does make me think about how good maybe my life actually is. That, if I don't have to worry about a lot of other things, that I could have the ability to wish for kind of silly or fun things, He just wishes he could not have this, health problem or this problem with his body. I think by the end of this first page of the book, it's already giving you a very good idea of how big of a problem this is for Augie. Yeah, Ava says he probably just wants to be normal and not have everybody treat him differently just because of his face. I think that's a really good point. Shanna says, if someone told me that I could have one wish, I would use it for someone else. But from how he describes himself, I don't blame him for wanting to be normal. Yeah. Gerard says, I agree with Augie about the magic lamp. Yeah. Yeah, Milo is saying that it does communicate that how he feels very strongly about not wanting to be this way. Yeah, Gerard says, I feel sad for Augie. Yeah, I think this definitely kind of, it kind of communicates right away that his life has not been easy. That even though he's had a lot of surgeries and he has a family that loves him and cares about him, that he would still give anything to have like a normal looking face. He probably wouldn't feel that way if everything up to this point in his life had just been really easy and normal. That the way that he feels this way tells you right away, like it has not been easy. It has not been normal for him, despite everything that they've tried to do to help him. Jordan says, he may think that he feels that if he had a normal face, he would be accepted in this world, which means that at that moment in time, he may feel out of place in the world. I think that's a really good point, Jordan. Yeah, and Gerard goes on to say, it must be really sad to have facial problems. Yeah, I would agree. I think, what do you guys think about a book like this and its ability to kind of help you see into somebody else's life? They say, if you've ever heard the saying, it's like you can't really know what another person's life is like until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Have you ever heard that saying before? What it's basically trying to communicate is it's really difficult to understand somebody else's problems or what they've been through unless you've actually had a chance to kind of live their life and experience what their life is like. For most of us, that's really hard. It's maybe impossible. How can we actually live somebody else's life and actually see their experiences, their problems, their successes through their eyes and see what it's like to be them? Well, I think one of the best ways is through reading books. When writers write about the experiences of other people that have had different lives than our own, you can really kind of get inside the head of somebody else and really see what their emotions are like, what they're experiencing, how they think about things. It can give you, it's one of the best ways to actually understand other people and what they're going through. And hopefully, maybe we can become better people by experiencing things through other people's eyes. Yeah, another viewer says that kind of makes me sad. Well, we don't want you to have to feel sad about it, but I think another kind of emotion we can have here is empathy. And what that means is kind of the ability to feel what somebody else is feeling. When you're able to kind of see what something is like for somebody else or kind of experience what somebody else is experiencing, they call that empathy. It just means, you're able to sort of try to understand somebody else, not just see something from the way you see it or feel it, but try to really feel what they're feeling. It can help you communicate to other people better. It can help you help other people better if you can really try to feel what they're going through. Yeah, N says, I have empathy for August. Yeah, I felt I did too after I read some of these sections, that if I didn't read a book like this, I don't know that I would have ever really thought about what it would be like to live like that. That's why I think books like this are really important and they're really amazing, that They're really good books to read, but they also make you feel like you're growing a little bit. I want to go back to something somebody said earlier. Sorry, I'm scrolling back through the Q&A to find this comment. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead a little bit. So Augie, his parents decide to have him go to school for the first time. And at first, he doesn't seem very happy about this idea. He's been homeschooled his whole life because he had a lot of surgeries, he had a lot of medical problems. His mom basically took time off from her job to basically be his teacher. But she says in a section here that she says she thinks it's time for him to go to school for real. And she makes a joke about, I'm not good at fractions. So she wants him to go to school for the first time. And I think if we try to imagine what it would be like, we can understand why Augie's not super excited about this idea at first. Can you imagine never going to school your whole life? And then when you're about to go into the 5th grade, you're 10 years old and your parents say, we're putting you in a school with all these people, and they might think you look funny, Wow, I think Augie is incredibly brave that he's willing to go to school. And I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about it too. But one of the first things is before he has his first day, he goes and he meets the principal or the head of the middle school. He meets some other students. What did you guys think about this section? What did you think about meeting these other students? Did you like these other students? Did you not like them? AG thinks he mentioned earlier, he liked one of the characters, but he didn't like another one. And he says, I don't know how Mr. Tushman chose these students. So what do you guys think about that? What did you think about the students that Mr. Tushman chose to meet Augie? I would agree. 2 of them seemed pretty nice, but one of them didn't seem so nice and asks some questions that are kind of rude. So do you think Mr. Tushman had a reason for picking these certain students? Do you think that maybe he just didn't know what one of them would be like? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah, N says you can really walk in the character's shoes. Alette says, I like the name Mr. Tushman. Yeah, it's kind of a funny name. Alan says that Augie is very brave. I agree. Yeah, Milo says that he's never gone to school either. He's in the 6th grade, and I have to admit, I wouldn't want to go. Yeah, so if you are homeschooled, the idea of like going to school for the first time could be a little bit scary. I totally get that. April also says, I'm homeschooled. And yeah, it's interesting. I bet those of you that are homeschooled can totally understand what Augie is going through, even if you didn't have any, facial deformity, or even if you didn't have any health problems. It's still a scary thing to go to a new place and meet a lot of new people sometimes. So if you can imagine what that would be like for you to go to a place like that for the first time, try to imagine what it would be like to also have a problem with your body that made you very kind of self-conscious or kind of very worried about what other people were going to think of you. Alette says, I liked Charlotte. Aubrey says, I liked them except Julian. Adira says, I dislike Julian. Yes, I feel like that's how most people feel. Yeah, Ian says, Jack was cool. Julian is mean. Yeah, so does anybody have any guesses? Why would Mr. Tushman pick these 3 students? Jack Will, his name, Jack Will, seems pretty nice. Maybe a little bit. All 3 of them, when they first meet Augie, they're kind of afraid to look at him, or they kind of look away because he looks very different. And it seems like they're very nervous about that, maybe even a little bit scared to kind of look right at him. Charlotte seems a little bit shy, but she's also really nice. Julian, yeah, he seems a little bit mean. Why would Mr. Tushman pick somebody that was a little bit mean? Do you think he didn't know that Julian was mean? Or do you think he picked him for a different reason. I'd be curious to see what you guys think about that. Yeah, Alette says, I also like Jack, but not Julian. Milo says, I don't like Julian. Yeah, I agree. Ava says, on page 33, Augie's mom says that Mr. Tushman told her that all of the kids were really sweet, and that's why he picked them. So Milo jumps in and says he didn't know. So that's very sweet, April. April says, I would be very nice to August. Yeah, I think you would be. So Ava and Milo are saying that Mr. Tushman thought Julian would be nice, or he didn't know that he would be mean. That's really interesting, because if Mr. Tushman thought all 3 students would be a good pick, that means that Julian must act one way when he's around Mr. Tushman, that the principal would think this kid would be really friendly. Then if Julian's not friendly when he's around somebody who's different, that kind of tells us something about Julian right away. We might have all met somebody like that in our lives at some point. Maybe when they're around the teachers and grown-ups, they act one way, but when they're around kids, they act a different way. Or maybe when they are, around somebody who's an authority figure, they act one way. And then when they're around other people, they act a different way. So do we think that's what's going on with Julian? Is he kind of pretend he's nice for grown-ups, but he's actually not? What do we think's going on there? Gerard says Julian acts like a bully. N says, I think that Mr. Tushman chose those people because he wants Augie to have self-confidence. Okay. April says Jack is a good friend. Alette says, in the book, it says Julian is a kid that is one way in front of adults and a different way in front of kids. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Alette. Ian says, I think he thought that Julian was a good kid because he acted different to adults. Aubrey says, he does not seem mean in front of grown-ups. And Abuka says, he's nice to adults but mean to kids. And April says that Julian is a bully. So, okay, it seems like most everybody is in agreement here. Alan, Milo, Aubrey agree with that. Gerard says so too. So that's something that's really interesting. And I think it's something that Augie is probably going to have to watch out for. Are the people that are treating him nice, do they really mean it? Are they really friendly? Or are they just going to try to pretend to be friendly when a grown-up is around? Who can he trust? Who's going to be a really good friend? Who should he maybe avoid? These are things that Augie is probably going to have to figure out as he goes along. I think we only have like 5 more minutes, and I wanted to go over one more thing before we end it off. Towards the end of the section we read, Augie is in Mr. Brown's class, and Mr. Brown writes up on the board the word precept. And then he talks about what that is. He defines a precept as saying, precepts equal rules about really important things. Then he says, or somebody asks, like a motto? And he says, like a motto, like a famous quote, like a line from a fortune cookie. Any sane or ground rule that can motivate you. Basically, a precept is anything that helps guide us when making decisions about really important things. I think that's a really good definition. One more time. Basically, a precept is anything that helps guide us when making decisions about really important things. So he tells the class that every month he's going to write a new precept, a new rule that helps guide us when we're making decisions about important things. And he has the students write it down in their notebooks too. So he says his September precept is, when given the choice between being kind when given the choice between being right or being kind, choose kind. I'd like to hear from all of you. What do you think this means? What did Mr. Brown mean by giving them this precept? What is this rule asking a person to do in their life? Second, why do you think Mr. Brown chose this precept? Do you think that there's a possible reason for it? Do you think that there's something that he was thinking about when he asked his students to write down the rule? When given the choice between being kind, when given the choice between being right or being kind, choose kind. Why do you think he picked that precept to be his first precept of the school year? Let's see. Oh yeah, just scrolling through. More people were finishing off talking about Julian. Okay, Ava says, because that kind of thing happens a lot in schools, where you have to make the choice between being right and being kind. Yeah, I think just making the choice to be kind at all, it is something that we're faced a lot with in our lives, in school and afterward. A lot of times people do not make the choice to be kind when they could have made the choice to be kind. Abuka says, Mr. Brown probably had Augie on his mind when he made that precept. Tell me more, Abuka. Why do you think he had Augie on his mind? What do you think is his intention in choosing this precept? Ian says, instead of telling the truth about a person, you should instead be kind and help. Yeah, I mean, maybe if a person is looking at Augie and they think that he looks different or looks strange, they don't need to necessarily say that. If you think somebody looks different, you don't have to just say to them, you look different, because is that kind? Probably not. So if we have a choice between, you could say, well, I'm not lying, or I'm not telling something that isn't true. Yes. But are we making the choice to be kind in a situation like that? Yeah, Adira says he was thinking about August. Alette says, it means that you should be nice to someone even if it makes you look not cool. It sort of applies to Augie. Yeah, I agree. I think you make a really good point. Jordan says, sometimes being right about something is the same thing as being kind. I agree. That's a really good point. Jordan goes on to say, maybe he had some kind of idea of the kind of kids at the school and thought that that precept might be something good to teach. Jordan, I think you're on the right track. I think you made a really good point. All right, we're just about out of time. This week, I would like you all to read to page 104. Page 104 in my copy, there's a section that says Genetics 101. So also, if you don't know what that word means, genetics, I think they talk about it in the chapter a little bit, but also this week, I want you to practice something. If you see a word that you don't know when you're reading, like genetics, find out what it means. This is something that we're going to practice. You can ask a grown-up. You can, if you have a dictionary at home, you can go look that word up in the dictionary and find out what it means. You can go on the internet and look at an online dictionary. But anytime you see a word like genetics, you're not sure what genetics means, find out. There's lots of ways to do that. And we're going to start practicing that this week so that we really understand what they're talking about. Okay, so in my copy, the chapter that says Genetics 101, when we turn the page, the end of that little chapter is in my copy, page 104. So if in your copy, ending Genetics 101 is on a different page, read to the end of that page. I'll also find out what percentage this is, but it's going to be probably around 30%, 31, 32%. You'll just know it by, it's the end of the Genetics 101 section. So thank you all for watching this week and talking about the book with me. I really liked talking about it with all of you. I'll put it up here on the screen so that you can all see. In the hardback, your week 2 assignment is to read through page 104 of Wonder. That's the end of the Genetics 101 chapter. Have fun, learn some new words, and I will talk to all of you next week as we discuss more of this wonderful book. See you guys then.